my calculations are correct, when this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit.
Hi, welcome to Connections with Kevin. I'm your host, Kevin Haight, and you are listening to this either on weirdradio.net, hopefully, or you are watching this on our YouTube channel. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, then make sure to like this video and subscribe below so you get notified whenever a new one of these gets posted. Also, if you're listening to this on weirdradio.net, make sure you bookmark the page and, just give good feedback. I'm going to do something a little bit different today because, hey, it's a learning process. First time I've ever done these kinds of shows. Anyways, this is going to be episode 2. At some point, I'll shut up for a moment and throw a graphic on the screen to give out information because there's some stuff that I'm going to go over today that just phonetically you probably would fuck it up. So I'm going to make sure to spell it out and also just spell it out for those that are only listening. And I'm going to throw a graphic on the screen for those that are watching. That way you can maybe pause it, take notes, whatever you need to do. Before I dive into this and really get into it, I do want to go ahead and just do a little disclaimer. I am going to be talking about religion to some extent, but only in so much as it relates to the esoteric or the ethereal, the metaphysical, simply because I'm going to be doing a little bit of a history lesson today about, I guess, divination. Because that's what this episode is going to mostly be about. It's going to be about divination, what it is, the history of it, what I know of it for certain, and different types of it. So this is definitely going to be more of an educational episode. If you're looking for something a little bit meatier, then tune in next week. But in order to get into all the meaty, juicy stuff, then you need to know what it's about, where it came from, some of the struggles that it's gone through. So yeah, it's just a little disclaimer. I will be touching on religion, but it's not to denounce anybody's religion or anybody's ideologies or beliefs. That's 100% a private, personal thing. Whatever you believe is what you believe. If you believe it to be right, then it's right. I'm not going to tell you one way or the other, and I'm not going to tell any of you what to believe. Again, that's completely personal and private, and that's 100% on you. So, that being said, I want to kind of dive into the history a little bit of divination. Before I dive into it too much, if somebody says the word divine, then immediately people will start thinking of angelic choirs and the Pope, and I don't fucking know. Usually it's religious type things, heaven, angels, that kind of shit. However, divine is usually something about, I don't want to say the supernatural because that kind of covers a lot of things, but the word divine is just not humanly. It refers to things that are above the human scope of reality, I guess, or existence. So divination is something that is kind of above our usual pay grade. And divining information means tapping into the ethereal or the esoteric or the metaphysical channels and the astral channels, however you want to tap in, to get information for things today, things yesterday, things tomorrow. So it's, I don't know, I'm kind of rambling about that. But the short of it is it's tapping into the non-physical to get information about the physical or the non-physical. And the history of it predates every major monotheistic religion. my history is a little rusty. It's been a while, but I know the oldest monotheistic religion. Monotheistic means one God, one deity, however you want to say it. The oldest is going to be Judaism, and that goes back almost 5,000 years from now. It's like between 4,500 and 5,000 years old. So it goes back a ways. I mean, it goes well beyond, AD and deep into the BC years. And then next, I believe, is Catholicism, because Christianity, as we know it today, like Protestant Christianity, is a branch off of Catholicism. So there's Judaism, then Catholicism, and then it goes to Islam. If I remember correctly, like Catholicism is roughly like 1,800 years old, and then Islam is only like 1,400 years old. And then Protestant Christianity, which kind of goes back to Martin Luther, that's only like 500-600 years old, something like that. It's really, as far as like the Protestant part of Christianity goes, it's the youngest. And since they do have different prayers, different hymns, different, same general belief structure, but they don't have like the saints, they don't have the Holy Mother Mary, they don't have any of that stuff. They just have, God, Jesus, Holy Spirit. Whereas with Catholicism, they have, God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, then they have like Holy Mother Mary and Joseph and all the saints, and then the Pope and cardinals and bishops, and it's a whole weird hierarchy. Anyways, the oldest being Judaism at, say, 5,000 years old. Divination predates that by millennia. Because if we try to trace it back to, I'll say like the earliest, earliest mentioning of it, at least to my knowledge, there might be something older than this, but my knowledge only goes back to the oracle at Delphi, or the Pythia, who was like the high priestess at that particular temple. Now that goes back probably 6,000-7,000 years. At least as far as like written records, but I know there's like stuff that predates even that. I just don't know of like the actual ins and outs of it. I don't have exact dates or names, but there were, high priests and priestesses in the Mesopotamian, the Sumerian, the Babylonian, like those cultures. They had their multitude of gods and goddesses, but they also had their divine people in the high priests and priestesses that they would go to for divination. Usually with like the ancient forms of that, they would use hallucinogenics. So, magic mushrooms. I don't think they had peyote out here. Well, I'm saying out here like I'm out in ancient Sumeria. No, they didn't have the peyote cactus out there. That's a Southwestern American thing. But I know they had, mushrooms. They had other herbs that would induce hallucinations, and they would see that as being visions. And, they would see what they saw, hear what they hear, and, give that to the people. However, tapping back into what I talked about last show, where I said that all humans are capable of some level of empathic ability as well as clair abilities, then we would have to go ahead and assume that some of these different oracles and prophets that they had, their seers is what they were usually called, they likely had high level clair abilities that allowed them to tap into the esoteric and the astral and the ethereal and the metaphysical realms to get information for the people that were before them. So now I've kind of focused more like on the Mediterranean era because that's what most of my knowledge is about. So I don't want to say a geek because fuck it, I was a nerd. I was a nerd as a kid and I loved Greek and Roman mythology, so I read up on the whole history. So my knowledge of that area is deeper than, say, like the Eastern cultures of the ancient Chinese and Japanese and the Mongolians and the Tibetans. But they had their seers as well. And if you go back millennia in human history to the beginning of like the Chinese dynasties and the Japanese dynasties, and then you have like the Mongolian and the Tibetan and even like Thai, but that's more like a modern, I don't want to say like modern country, but it's more recently made. Like that border is more recent than, anyways. But you get what I'm saying. It's like they had like the Indian culture out there as well. And Indians, they would use astrology with their Vedic astrology. But that's a whole nother show. But I know like the Chinese definitely tapped into astrology. The Japanese a little bit. The Egyptians definitely did. The Mayans definitely fucking did. And the whole point of all of this is that throughout all these ancient cultures, there's the commonality of, people with clair abilities, their seers and their oracles and their high priests. They had places, like elevated places within society. They weren't like, they weren't really outcast. They were actually like, I know some emperors, kings, queens, pharaohs, they had a court seer to help them make big decisions sometimes. Like, I know in French court, and mind you, this is only going back like what, 700 years maybe. There was Nostradamus. Pretty much anybody in the world has an idea of Nostradamus, or they've heard the name. Whether you're standing in the checkout line at the supermarket and you look at the freaking tabloids and like Nostradamus predicted blah blah blah. Okay, well, Nostradamus is probably like next level dude to where puts like everybody modern day to shame. But Nostradamus definitely used astrology. He used visions, like, so he would take hallucinogenics to induce visions. He would have, random visions. So he definitely had a number of clair abilities. And, obviously without knowing him, because I'm not that old, he definitely like honed his abilities to where he could see, centuries into the future. Like, it's no bullshit that he was predicting like the fall of Russia and like predicting Hitler and all this other shit in our history. Only, 70 years ago? But, at least for the Nazis. So he was predicting stuff hundreds of years into the future. And he was actually pretty accurate with it. Now, we do have someone more modern. He's no longer with us. His name is Edgar Casey, and that last name is Cayce. Now, he's more from the 30s, 40s, 50s, somewhere in there. So definitely closer to our time. So he actually was pretty much on the same level as Nostradamus, to where he was predicting stuff that's happening now, has happened like recently. And he, as far as I know, he didn't use astrology or anything. He was just 100% dependent upon his clair abilities. And again, someone that really honed them and developed them to where he could see far into the future, far beyond his own lifetime. Uh, if you really want to like go down that rabbit hole, I definitely suggest it. But one of the things you look up is the Casey New World map, and he had, I don't know the full story on it. I've only touched on it, and I was like, holy crap. But he predicted some natural disasters that would change the face of the earth. So new coastlines and stuff. And if you look at the map that he kind of drew out for the United States and like North America, if you go through enough pages, you'll find that the U.S. Navy actually still uses that map to some extent, as far as like planning things for the future. So if you happen to live like maybe in a landlocked state and they have like a Navy base, you're like, why the hell is there a naval base in, say Arizona? Like, why is there a naval base in Arizona? You have like what, the Colorado River, and that's it. Well, if you look at the New World map, then you'll see like where the coastline kind of comes in. And you're like, oh, well, now I see why the U.S. military has a base here instead of closer to the coast. So even at like our highest levels, there are, departments within the government that use the information from people with clear abilities. They just don't like go out and broadcast it. But I mean, you'll see it if you go looking for it. You'll see that it's a U.S. naval map. Anyways, so kind of circling back a little bit because I kind of jumped ahead. So my apologies on that. But the ancient cultures all over the world. So not just like, the Eastern cultures or the Mediterranean cultures, but going to the Nordic ones, you had the Vikings and the Celts and Saxons that had, people within their own cultures that were revered because they were seers, they were, prophets or oracles, whatever they called them. And it's kind of a shame that today in modern American culture, and I guess it kind of ties back to the whole puritanical roots of this country, a lot of like the old world stuff was left behind. And it's really kind of odd and sad that once America was started, those kinds of people, due to the, as I just said, like the puritanical roots of religious freedom, they became outcasts. They didn't have like the Salem witch trials in England. They had them here in America, up in Massachusetts. And that's completely and 100 traced back to the whole Protestant branch of Christianity, and their casting out and shunning of the things that didn't fit within their belief structure anymore. Even though, I mean, if you want to break it down, they borrowed pagan holidays, throughout the year, to even form Catholicism and then Christianity. So it's, I don't know, it's sad to me that, the people with clear abilities in America became outcasts, and, even today they're really kind of frowned upon, laughed at, shunned. I'm more than willing to bet any amount of money that any number of people listening to this or watching this, they've probably hidden their interest in the esoteric from their more religious family members. And it's because of the stigma attached to it. So it would be great if, culture today, like society today, could, I don't know, pull a stick out their ass and their heads out of each other's and kind of go back to the old ways a little bit and be more open-minded about the things that they don't understand. But touching on that real quick, I do find it funny that in certain parts of Protestant Christianity, there are like little pockets that believe in things like second sight. That's what they usually call it. They call it the gift of sight. And to where like the clairvoyant people would fall under that. And they believe in the clair abilities, but only in so much as they call it gifts from God. So if you get messages, like you hear voices or whatever, then they're like, oh, it's the voice of the Holy Spirit. And if you get accurate information and then relay that information, then like, oh my goodness, you have a gift from God. And I'm just like, all right, cool. But it's interesting and funny to me that certain pockets of modern Christianity will rationalize it some ways that they can then fit it into their belief structure without fearing the wrath of God and going to hell. Whereas if they would just be more open-minded and realize that these abilities predate their religion, then, I don't know, it would probably alleviate a lot of tension in numerous families. And I don't know, maybe like open a door for people like us. So that's kind of like a quick, rough history from the beginning to current times. And so I'm going to spend like the latter half of this episode going over the types of divination. But what I'm going to do right now is something that, like I said, I'm going to do things a little bit differently this episode and, throw the noodles at the wall, see what sticks, right? So I'm going to give y'all a quick little break and I'm going to throw some music out there, check it out, or, take a few minutes, go outside, stand in the sunshine, go play with your crystals or go get a drink, snack, whatever. Apparently I need to get a drink, but, yeah, just enjoy the music and take a quick break and we'll be back. All right, cool. welcome back. Hopefully you enjoyed the music. If not, well, eat a bag of dicks. I'm just kidding. I mean, you don't have to like it. If you did, great. All right. Anyways, welcome back. We're going to continue this episode, continue this show, and dive into the different types of divination. Now, just quick recap. Divination is tapping into the non-physical to gain knowledge of the world, the future, the past, whatever you're trying to get information on. Divination is just using non-physical means to do it. So, what are the non-physical means? What I mean by that is, like, some people do it in meditation. If you could do that, awesome. Good for you. I'm not one of them. Meditation for me is... it's damn near impossible for me. I think I've managed to pull it off like once for like 2 seconds. Anyways, it's okay. I'll go ahead and put this in here now. Meditation usually for me goes like this. So I close my eyes and I'm like, okay, Kevin, clear everything out your damn brain. All right, everything's clear. It's pitch black, blackness. Okay, just envelop yourself in the blackness. And then, okay, so I'm floating in the blackness. And then it's like, oh, I'm floating through space. I'm floating through the stars. And I'm like, the stars, next frontier. And I'm like, okay, well, now I'm thinking about Star Trek, and then I'm thinking about Jean-Luc Picard. Then it goes to like X-Men as Professor X. Then I'm like, okay, well, cool, Wolverine, that's Hugh Jackman. Then I'm thinking of like other stuff, and it's fucking nuts how my brain in a matter of moments just goes from thinking of nothing to wherever the hell I end up. It's kind of crazy. So that's why meditation doesn't usually work for me. If you're like that, if you're one of those people, it sucks. So you know what I'm talking about. And, it is what it is. So that being said, if you can meditate, great. That's one way of doing divination, because you can tap into the astral realms and the other realms and gain information. You can travel, you can do whatever. That's one method of divination. Might even be the most common. But the ones that I know of for certain are scrying, not crying, scrying, using, we'll call them message boards. There are pendulums, runes, and cards. So going back to the first one with scrying, there are different ways to do scrying. A simplistic definition of scrying would be simply focusing on something until everything just kind of fades away and you just kind of zone out, really. But it's like a focused zoning out, if that makes sense. To where what I mean is like, one of the ways to do it is fire. There's fire scrying. Now you can do this like with a, fireplace. Some people use a candle, others, bonfire, whatever. But it's really just sitting down and concentrating and focusing on a flame. And you end up just kind of like staring at it. And then everything just kind of fades away, and then you're zoned out, and you are then able to gain information that way. It's kind of like, it's almost like meditating, but it's using an object to facilitate it. So the ways to do scrying, though, you can do water, like there's water scrying. Oddly enough, they've actually kind of shown this in films, but they didn't call it scrying. Like in, what was it? I don't know which Harry Potter film it was, but let's say that bowl of water, and like then pictures start showing up in it. That is like a form of scrying, to where you're just focusing on the reflections in the water, and then they kind of like go wonky and fade away, and then you're seeing, like a little movie playing out on the surface of the water. But obviously, like if somebody else were to like walk up, they're not going to be able to see it. It's just something that is happening for you. And it's more or less like really happening kind of like in your mind's eye, to where you're able to just focus on the water and then you see it. So you can do that with any kind of like body of water. Some people do it at the lake or a pond or anything really. I mean, shit, you can fill up a sink with water and stare into it, and that would be water scrying. I already went over the fire one. The most common, obviously, is just lighting a candle, because it's going to just be one flame that you can focus on. But some people look at like the embers of a fire, because I mean they're kind of like playing around anyway. If you've ever actually like kind of stared at the embers of a fire, they're kind of like glowing brighter and dimming, and almost kind of looks like it's breathing. So yeah, there's that. And then obviously using the actual campfire or bonfire or fireplace. So that's a form of scrying. Mirror scrying is a little tricky, because most people that do mirror scrying are going to use an obsidian mirror. If you don't know what obsidian is, it's volcanic glass. It's usually black. And to get an obsidian mirror, it's not usually very big. It's usually only like the size of like a tea plate, like a plate for a teacup. It's only like anywhere from like 4 to 6 inches across. And it's just highly polished to where it then acts as a mirror. But because it's black, it's not like 100% reflective. So it's easier to use that to scry, because you can kind of like focus on maybe like a darker area and kind of focus on that to where everything then fades away. Using like a regular mirror, it's more difficult because it's reflecting everything. So it can be difficult to focus on a single thing within that image. But it can be done, obviously. But most people like to use an obsidian mirror because it's easier. Then last but not least, as far as the scrying goes, everybody knows about a crystal ball. That's probably the most well-known form of scrying, because you always see like a little gypsy lady with her bandana and dangling earrings, and the crystal ball. Well, when you use a crystal ball, if you've ever looked into one, I don't know if you have, but if you ever looked into one, the images are flipped upside down. Like the images on the other side are flipped upside down. They're inverse. So people tend to use crystal balls because, as I said, it just inverts the images on the other side. And you can then look at it differently than if you're just staring at the person across from you. So the image flips upside down, and you're able to kind of pick out different things. And I've only managed to do this once. It's really fun if you can manage to do it. But if you're not practiced in it, it will give you a hell of a headache afterwards, which blows. So be prepared for that if you're going to try it. So what happened for me was I was actually using my wife's that I got for her as a gift. And I was just had it on the stand and was looking at it, and I'm looking at it, and I'm just like staring at it for a while, and just out of nowhere, I end up just focusing on some part of the image, and immediately just zone out. Like as soon as I locked on to a single part, I zoned out, and all the stuff that I was looking at faded away. But then within that little sphere, I was like seeing different images kind of like pop up as like little flashes. And I was like, this is kind of fun. This reminds me of doing shrooms. And I just kept staring at it, and I can't tell you what any of the images are now. I know that it was just like random people. To me, at least at the time, it was random people. But then I would end up having like a feeling of deja vu later on. And I was like, where do I know that person from? And then it would just like flash into my brain. Oh, hey, you saw that person in the crystal ball. I'm like, why were you in the fucking crystal ball? It's like, what importance do you have in my life that you, in your mug, popped up in the crystal ball that I was looking at? And I never did get any answers on that, but just one of the many mysteries of the universe, I guess. So that's scrying. It's really just like a focused zoning out. And my theory on the way that it works is that whenever you end up focusing so intently on a single thing and you end up zoning out, you more or less kind of check out of your physical mind, so that all the shit going on around you, all the pressures and stresses of the day and the shit that's bothering you, those all kind of stay behind in your physical brain. So then you're able to connect with the other realms beyond that, the non-physical realms, and get information that way. Like that's the only theory that really makes sense for me, at least. Hopefully that makes sense for you. I don't know. I'm not you. But the next one that I want to talk about are message boards. And I don't mean like the little scrolling tickers or whatever, but everybody's heard of a Ouija board or a Ouija board. And there's like the yes, the no, the maybe, the goodbye, the hello, and like the letters of the alphabet. And honestly, it's a pain in the ass using those, because if you're asking for like an answer on something that's not a simple yes or no, and has to fucking spell it out, I don't know. If that word's too damn long, you might forget how it was started out. But there are different forms of it. Like some message boards have like short phrases on them. So it's a little easier to communicate. It's like common phrases that maybe that particular reader or seer is able to use to provide information. Because you can kind of customize a message board to however you need it to be. So how does a message board work? And this is something that it's almost always up for debate, but okay, let me just say this. First and foremost, I would never use a message board, simply because there are far too many lower level, or like, I don't know, like malevolent energies around you and malevolent beings around you at any given time, really, that would happily attach themselves to the pointer on that and fuck with you in whatever way they could. And because your energy is then attached to that board, they can then easily attach themselves to you and end up causing problems in your life. So it's more or less like asking for trouble if you bust out a message board. There are ways to protect yourself, obviously, because people still use them. But from my part, I would not use them, just because one momentary lapse of protection and some shit can get attached to you, and then it's a fucking pain in the ass to get rid of it. So try to stay away from them. You can use them effectively and you can use them safely, but I would leave that to someone that's more experienced, more seasoned in using them. But to go back to the question I posed and how do they work, it's actually kind of simple. If you're using it correctly and safely, then you're actually just tapping into your higher self. Now, what I mean by higher self is like your energetic self, your energetic body, your astral body, whatever you want to call it. Now, the reason that version of you can give the physical you information is they're seeing things from a different level. Imagine it, like a good analogy would be the physical you, like you, as you sit there, stand there, lie there, whatever. Say you are on the first floor of a skyscraper and you look out the window and you can just see whatever's on street level, and you can see down the street this way, you can see down the street that way, but not too far, because eventually like something cuts off your field of vision, and you can see up a little bit, but you can't see all the way to the top. You press your face up against the glass trying to look out, but you're still not going to be able to see all the way up to the top. So your field of vision is limited. Now, your higher self would be at the penthouse, to where they can see all the stuff you see, but they can also see a shit ton more. And then they can relay that information to you. Get that? Okay. So if you use a message board correctly, you're just tapping into your higher self to gain information. And, it moves about the board, gives you the information. There you go. Now, if you're using it incorrectly or unsafely, what can end up happening is something else ends up moving the piece for you. And as I already described, like it can then attach itself to you by way of like energetic connections, and cause problems for you. So leave the message boards for more experienced people. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So moving forward from there, you then have runes. Now, runes are pretty old. Runes go back many, many, many years. Like the Vikings had people that used runes. The Celts, they had them. And I want to say Egyptians used them as well. They had like different lettering, obviously. So runes are a little interesting in that they can actually be traced back to throwing bones. Now, throwing bones, it's not a dice game. It's not, slang for anything. It literally was like ancient seers would have like a bag of pieces of bone. And depending upon how they landed, when they tossed them on a bag, they would then be able to like divine the information from that. It's akin to like reading tea, like tea reading, because like based upon the shapes and stuff, you can make out different messages, different information. But then they realized, oh, hey, I can make runes, and the based upon like what ones were face up, what ones were face down, and same thing with like the bones. They would shake the bag, toss them down, and read them as they lie. So that's using runes. Now, I don't know how to use runes. I looked into learning it, and after learning that it ties into like some old magic, I was like, I'm good. I'm good. Because like the ancient shit, I'm just not messing with it. So if you want to learn how to read runes, go for it. If it's something that interests you, I just suggest you actually read up on the history of it first and what all entails it, because using willy nilly can fuck you up. I know that much. It's almost like the message boards. Use them wrong, they'll fuck up your life. So, you know, at your own discretion as far as runes go. Another form of divination would be a pendulum. Now, pendulum, you can legit make that out of anything. You make it out of a fucking rubber band and a nut from a bolt. And loop it through there, and however it swings, you got a pendulum. Now, sometimes the material that the pendulum is made out of can make a difference in how strong the connection is. So that's something to take into consideration as well. Pendulums are a step down in some regards from the message boards, because outside things can influence them if you don't use it correctly. Obviously, you can protect yourself and ban other things from interfering with it. Usually, you have like some kind of affirmation that you use, that you say out loud before using a pendulum, so as to prevent outside forces from messing with it. But pendulums are kind of fun. It takes a little while for mine to get going, but for my wife, it's just like, yes, no. It's like ready to do flips for her. But for me, it still works. A lot of it, it's just, again, connecting with your higher self. And usually the way that you do it is hold it to where it's not even moving. And a good thing to do is like rest your elbow so people can't say, oh, you're wiggling it and you're moving it. No, you put your elbow down, have the pendulum hanging, and connect with your higher self. And then say, show me yes. And however it swings, whether it's to and fro or side to side, that's going to be yes. The opposite, you obviously then say, show me no. You'll show you no. But always make sure to throw in like unsure or maybe. And usually that means it's going to be just spinning around in a circle. And you can even go a little bit further and say, hey, clockwise circle is maybe, counterclockwise would be unsure. Pendulums are kind of fun. And it always kind of trips people out because they try to debunk it. People that don't believe in it will like intently stare at your hand and your wrist and your arm to make sure that it's not moving and you're not like slightly moving to make it sway. And it always trips them out whenever they're like, you weren't moving at all, and it was like going like this. I'm like, yep. But yeah, it's another thing where you connect with your higher self and it moves it for you. So again, that's something you probably want to work your way up to. Probably not something you want to start out with. And then the last form of divination that I am knowledgeable of are cards. Now, there are different kinds of cards out there. The ones that I know of for myself are tarot, and tarot decks are usually based upon the Rider Waite. The Rider Waite deck has the 4 suits, which are swords, wands, coins, and then cups. And then it has like the major arcana. Now the majors, each one of those cards has a much stronger significance than, say, the 2 of cups or the 3 of swords. So now the different suits, they obviously have meanings. They have like, It's almost like a playing deck, and actually you can use a playing deck to do readings because the four suits of a playing deck are going to be the same as the four suits of tarot because it goes from 1 to 10, and then it has the page, which would be, I guess that would be the jack. Well, it's kind of close. Anyways, within the four suits, you're going to have the page, the knight, the queen, and the king. The king being the highest, obviously. And then with the major arcana, it goes from 0, and for rider weight, it should go to 22. Some decks, it goes a little bit higher. Some, it goes a little bit lower. Because I guess, like, I think sometimes they skip the 0 and start at 1 and go to like 23, and others go 0 to 22. Like, there's actual like meaning behind the numbers, so I don't understand why they would fuck with that. Anyways, that's going to be tarot. The other ones that I know of are Oracle, Lenormand, and Ascension. Ascension is one that is fairly new. I think I've said this before, maybe. I'm the only person I know of that does Ascension readings. I'm certain there are plenty of other people out there that have the deck and do the readings. But I also know that it wasn't a really popular deck, and I'll explain why in a moment. Okay, so to kind of go over the differences between the four types of decks that I know of. So this is how I usually explain it whenever somebody is getting a reading for me. They're like, well, I don't know what one to use or what one to pick. So a tarot deck for me, like my tarot deck focuses solely on your physical life, like your day-to-day, your 9 to 5, Sunday through Saturday life. It's going to focus on the things going on in your daily life. So it's going to focus on your friendships, your romantic relationships. It's going to focus on your career. It can pick up on health stuff sometimes. However, I will go ahead and say that it's never a good idea to use card readings or any other kind of divination for medical advice. You can use it to facilitate and maybe give, your doctor an idea of what to look for, but always leave it up to the medical professionals to actually sort that out. Now, as I was saying, it'll focus on your day-to-day type of stuff. So that's at least for my deck. That's how I use my tarot deck. I don't use it to tap into any outside stuff. So that's how I define tarot. Now, Oracle, my Oracle deck can tap into the same day-to-day stuff as tarot, but it can also tap into the energetic side. So it can tap into any issues you might be having with your chakra. It can tap into any kind of like spiritual dissonance that you're having within yourself. So it can tap into a little bit more. So I say like tarot is physical, Oracle is physical and spiritual. And then Lenormand is a blunt instrument. In so much as it cuts through all the bullshit, it doesn't sugarcoat anything, and it just goes straight to the point. It don't give a fuck about your feelings. It's going to give you the information, and you do with it whatever you need to do. So the Norman is definitely not for people that need their hand held, either as a reader or someone getting a reading. It is definitely like a no bullshit kind of deck, and there's a whole bunch of different ways to read those cards, but I will tell you that if you find someone that's really good at Lenormand, I do have a friend that is pretty good at it, and if she wants, I'll bring her on as a guest one day. But and I will let her tell you all about Lenormand. She's definitely much better at it than I am. I'm having to relearn it because I got away from it. But it's really interesting how those cards work, because depending upon what layout you use, like what spread you use, it kind of changes the relationships between the cards, because you can read them like this way and this way and this way and this way. And it's really interesting learning how. It's really interesting going from learning tarot and oracle to Lenormand. It'd probably be a lot easier to go from Lenormand to tarot, because you're like, oh wow, this is really easy. But Lenormand is definitely something I'm gonna get more educated on and get better at. Now, the last one that I mentioned, anyway, Ascension. I actually have my deck here, and this deck, I'm going to show you why I believe it wasn't very popular. For starters, this thing has an absolute amalgam of different ideologies, I guess. Not really ideologies. Different beliefs, different beings. So, being that it doesn't focus solely on one ideology, I don't think it sat well with a lot of people. And then the other thing is that there's no artwork. That's the back of the card, that's the front. It's all text. And I know that a lot of readers heavily depend upon the artwork in their cards to get information. It can be really helpful whenever you're reading a card. If you're like, okay, well, if like the meaning of the card isn't really clicking, it's like, okay, we'll look at the artwork of the card and see if that fits in with what else is going on around it. And with those, there's no artwork. But that deck was actually gifted to me because a person bought it thinking it would be something fun to learn. And she ended up not connecting with the deck. And she was like, I don't know what the fuck to do with this. So I'm going to send it to you because you seem to be able to read pretty much anything. So I'm going to send it to you. I got it. I read over it. And I was like, oh, hell yeah. I'm going to try this out. And I do pretty well with that one. That deck, it's only ever a 3-card spread. It's a past, present, future. And that one is really different in that with Tarot, Oracle, Lenormand, you shuffle the deck, you pull from the top of the deck and lay them out in whatever spread you're going to use. This one, you fan the deck out face down Vegas style. And at least for me, I don't know if any of you watching or listening read from this deck, and how you do it. But my connection with it showed me this how I was supposed to do it. Fan them out, hold the first card down with my hand so as not to like cause any issues, but close my eyes and just have my hand skim over the top of the cards, and whatever ones like kind of stick to my hand and come out, that's the card that needs to come out at that time. So pass it over 3 times, and those are the cards that I pull and I do the reading for people. And it's called an Ascension Deck because it focuses only on your individual ascension journey. So with that one, I always tell people, okay, well, this one, it doesn't really give a shit where you're at in your journey. You can be someone that's only recently awakened and you have no idea what the fuck you're supposed to be doing. Well, that one will give you a really good starting point and in the next couple of steps, so you can really kind of get going on your journey. If you're in the middle of your journey and you just feel stuck, you haven't been learning anything, you haven't been growing spiritually, okay, cool, get that reading. It'll tell you what the fuck you either did wrong or what you missed and how to move past it. And if you're really into your journey and you're like, okay, well, I just want to know if I'm in the right place, it will definitely let you know if you're in the right place. And if you're not, it'll tell you how to get to where you're supposed to be. So that one, once I introduce that deck, people will start getting that one a lot. I haven't been doing readings a lot lately. Just, I know I got away from it. But, you know, I guess I'm going to get back into it now. So, yeah, those are the 4 decks that I know of. Those are the 4 types of cards that I know of. I know there's like a Thoth deck out there. I don't know anything about it, unfortunately. I haven't, educated myself on it. Obviously, that's something I need to do. But yeah, those are the types of divination. You have the scrying with water, fire, crystal ball, and mirrors. You have message boards, you have runes, you have pendulums, and then you have cards. For me, I know of the Tarot, Oracle, Lenormand, and Ascension. So, yeah. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Hopefully it was more informative, and hopefully you enjoyed the music earlier. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and toss a graphic up on the screen here at the end with the information that I think you guys might need, like spelling of names and stuff. I know some of you probably are like Lenormand. No, it's Lenormand with a D at the end. But anyways, I'll toss that graphic up. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the support. And hopefully I'll have some of y'all back next episode. So until then, take care of yourselves and blessings to each and every one of you.